5 college students savagely murdered over 3 days, a community gripped by panic. The killer, a drifter with a knife, would later inspire one of Hollywood's most famous horror films. But this is no movie. It's the true story of Danny Rowling, the Gainesville Ripper. Gainesville, Florida, August 1990. The fall semester is just beginning at the University of Florida. Students bustle into town, hauling boxes into dorms and apartments. It's normally a time of excitement and fresh start, but this year, darkness descends without warning. In the span of one long weekend, 5 students are found brutally murdered in their off-campus apartment. The crime scenes are horrific, bodies arranged in grotesque poses, as if the killer wanted to create a nightmare tableau. Seasoned investigators whisper that even they have never witnessed such brutality. A serene college town is suddenly living a real-life horror story. The first bodies are discovered on August 26, 1990. Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, 2 freshmen, just 17 years old, are found slain in their Williamsburg Village apartment near campus. Both had been stabbed to death in the night. Larson was attacked in her upstairs bedroom as she slept, and Powell was killed downstairs, bound with tape that the killer removed afterward to destroy evidence. Their bodies were left in disturbing position, a sickening signature that would become tragically familiar. The next day, police make a ghastly discovery at a small duplex not far away. Krista Hoyt, an 18-year-old student at a local community college and part-time clerk for the sheriff's office, has not shown up for her shift. Officers enter her home on the evening of August 27 and find Hoyt murdered in a similarly brutal fashion. In fact, the killer had gone even further, mutilating her body and posing it in a shocking way. The crime scene deeply unnerves even veteran cop. One of Hoyt's colleagues on the force is first on the scene. He cannot shake the image for the rest of his life. An aspiring police officer herself, Krista Hoyt, died at the hands of a sadistic predator. By now, word of the murders is spreading like wildfire. Gainesville is in an uproar, swarming with police and buzzing with fear, but the killer isn't finished. On August 28, a call comes from the Gatorwood Apartments near campus. Inside one unit, police find 2 more victims, 23-year-old roommate Manuel Manny Tabawada and Tracy Paul. Tabawada, a former football player and aspiring architect, fought fiercely for his life. Evidence shows a violent struggle throughout his bedroom, but he too was overwhelmed and stabbed to death. Tracy Paul, hearing the struggle, tried to lock herself in her room. It was no use. The killer broke in. In her final moment, Tracy is believed to have confronted the intruder. "You're the one, aren't you?" she reportedly said, realizing this was the serial killer terrorizing Gainesville. "Yeah, I'm the one," he replied before he attacked her. Like the other victims, Tracy was savagely stabbed. Her body was later found on the living room floor, posed and partially cleaned with soap. Another grim attempt by the killer to destroy evidence. 5 young lives had been extinguished in just 3 days. The murders were all shockingly similar. Brutal stabbing, mostly targeting petite young women, with the killer invading through sliding glass doors or windows under cover of darkness. The methodical posing and cleaning of the body suggested a single perpetrator with a deranged ritual. Gainesville authorities publicly acknowledged what everyone feared: a serial killer was on the loose. Panic swept through Gainesville as soon as the news broke. A city known for football games and lively student parties suddenly felt under siege. No one knew where or when the murderer would strike next. Students fled in droves. An exodus of young people packed their cars and ran home to their family. Those who stayed behind huddled in large groups for safety. Many refused to sleep alone. They bunked together in dorm lounges or stayed with friends, baseball bats, and kitchen knives within arm's reach. National media descended on Gainesville, dubbing the unknown slayer the Gainesville Ripper. TV trucks lined the street, broadcasting the town's nightmare to the world. Rumors flew. Was the killer a student, an escaped convict? Every night brought fresh dread, with police sirens wailing through darkened neighborhoods. Concerned parents flooded the police and university with phone calls, begging for updates or demanding their children come home. Even as fear paralyzed the community, detectives were frantically piecing together clues. The crime scenes yielded a few important hints. Forensic teams found tape residue on the victim's skin, suggesting the killer had bound them, but removed the duct tape afterward. A chemical mist was detected on some body. It turned out the killer had used household soap or cleaning vinegar to wipe them down, trying to eliminate any DNA or fingerprint. Investigators also noticed the killer's method of entry. In each case, he pried open a door or window with a screwdriver and slipped inside quietly. Each targeted apartment bordered a wooded area, providing cover for the murderer to approach and escape unseen. These patterns gave police a behavioral profile, a stealthy, methodical predator who planned his attacks carefully. Almost immediately, police had a potential suspect. They zeroed in on an 18-year-old University of Florida freshman named Edward Humphrey, who lived in the same complex as one of the crime scenes. Humphrey had a history of mental illness and erratic, aggressive behavior. He bore scratch marks on his face, possibly from a struggle, and And as the town panic grew, media outlets splashed Humphrey's troubled past across headlines. Under tremendous public pressure, police arrested him on a minor charge unrelated to the murder. Many began to assume the Gainesville Ripper had been caught, but the investigation was far from over, and a critical piece of evidence would soon cast doubt on the case against Humphrey. At all three murder scenes, technicians had recovered semen samples. DNA testing was in its infancy in 1990, but labs could determine blood type. The forensic analysis revealed that the unknown killer had type B blood. Edward Humphrey's blood type was type A. The main suspect did not match the crime scene evidence. It was a crushing blow for investigators. After weeks of work, they realized the real killer was still out there and could strike again at any moment. They quietly released Humphrey, who was never charged with the murder, but by then he had been vilified in the press. The true Gainesville Ripper was still unknown, and pressure to find new leads intensified. Unbeknownst to the task force, they had already stumbled onto a major clue, but had failed to recognize its significance. On the very day Krista Hoyt's body was found, a bank just a half-mile away was robbed by a man who fled into the woods. Officers responding to that incident noticed a campsite hidden in the forest, as if someone had been secretly living there. At the campsite, they found a screwdriver, a bag of cash stained with dye from the bank's money pack, a gun, and an audio cassette player with a tape inside. The transient man who had occupied this camp fled and couldn't be located at the time because the bank robber had used a gun and the student murders involved a knife. Investigators didn't connect the two events. The evidence from the campsite, including that mysterious tape, was logged and stored, but no one listened to the recording for months. In hindsight, it was a critical oversight. If we had played the tape earlier, we would have had this guy 3 months ago, one investigator admitted later. As fall turned to winter, the Gainesville task force was still hunting their faceless killer. Then, a breakthrough came from 700 miles away. Investigators in Florida learned of an unsolved triple murder in Shreveport, Louisiana from the year before. On November 4th, 1989, a family had been attacked in their home. 55-year-old William Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean were brutally killed. The case, still cold, bore eerie hallmarks of the Gainesville murder. The female victim, Julie, had been posed after death with tape residue on her body, and her body had been cleaned with vinegar. Louisiana police shared another crucial detail. The likely perpetrator of the Shreveport murders had type B blood. For Florida investigators, this was the puzzle piece they needed. They suddenly saw the Gainesville Ripper not as a local culprit, but a traveling serial killer who might have struck before. Amid these revelations, a tip came in that shifted the investigation onto the right track at last. A woman named Cindy Juratsich in Louisiana contacted Crime Stoppers after hearing about the Gainesville murder. Months earlier, during the week of the murders, Cindy had been camping in Florida with her then husband when news of the students' slayings broke. She immediately thought of an acquaintance from her hometown of Shreveport, a man who had once been her neighbor and who had made disturbing statements about the possibility of killing people. Hatman's name was Danny Rowling. Cindy recalled how Rowling had also been deeply troubled and unwelcome at his own parents' house, especially after violent incident with his police officer father. At first, she brushed aside the intuition, but as details of the Gainesville case became public, notably the similarity to the Shreveport murders, she felt she had to speak up. Her call proved to be a turning point. The focus now turned to Danny Harold Rowling. Investigators dug into his background and quickly found a trail of violence. Rowling was a 36-year-old drifter from Shreveport with an extensive criminal record. He had spent early 1990 drifting through the South after an explosive confrontation with his father. Just that May, Rowling's father, a local police lieutenant, had pushed him to the breaking point. The two argued viciously, and Rowling's father chased him out of the house at gunpoint. In a rage, Danny Rowling returned with his own gun and shot his father in the face. Remarkably, the elder Rowling survived, losing an eye and an ear, but Danny fled, disappearing before he could be arrested. Using stolen IDs, Rowling drifted through multiple states and eventually made his way to Florida that summer. He set up a secluded camp in the woods near the University of Florida, the very campsite where police later found the evidence cache. Rowling, it turned out, had been right under their noses the whole time. When investigators ran the name Danny Rowling through police databases, they got an immediate hit. In a stroke of luck, Rowling was already in custody, not for murder, but for a local armed robbery. On September 7th, 1990, just 2 weeks after the last Gainesville murders, a homeless nameless drifter had been arrested 40 miles away in Ocala after robbing a grocery store at gunpoint. His name, Danny Rowling. He'd been sitting in jail for months on the robbery charge while the murder investigation swirled. Now, everything came together. Authorities realized the man they'd been seeking was literally behind bars the whole time. Armed with the Shreveport lead and Cindy's tip, Florida investigators finally listened to that tape from the campsite. What they heard made their hair stand on end. On the tape, a man's voice sang folk country songs and rambled in an almost confessional tone. In one eerie recording, he sang, "Mystery writer, what's your name? You're a killer, a drifter, gone insane." In between songs, the man talked about his life, his family, and the feeling that he had gone down the wrong road in life. Then, as if to leave no doubt, the singer on the tape said his own name, Danny Rowling. This audio diary was a smoking gun confession. Investigators knew they had their man. The evidence against Rowling piled up quickly. His blood type was a match, type B, like the killer. Tools from his campsite matched marks at the break-in. And after a year of investigation, on November 15, 1991, Danny Rowling was formally charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder for the Gainesville student slaying. The Gainesville Ripper finally had a face. During this confession process, Rowling also divulged an unsettling insight into his psyche. He claimed he wasn't truly in control when he killed. He spoke of harboring multiple personality or dark alter ego. One persona he called Enod, Danny spelled backward, was, according to him, a mischief maker, a bad person, but not evil, Rowling said. The other he named Gemini, a colder, more sinister entity he blamed for the murder. Rowling alleged that Gemini took over during his murderous rampages. Investigators and psychologists were skeptical. Later, they would note that the name Gemini seemed lifted from a fictional killer in the movie Exorcist 3, which had been released just months before the Gainesville murder. A forensic psychologist who examined Rowling concluded that he was likely fabricating the multiple personality as an attempt to diminish his own blame, essentially saying, "The devil made me do it." In truth, Danny Rowling knew exactly what he was doing. He was sane enough to plan, execute, and cover up his crime. The so-called personalities were merely an excuse, and few were convinced by this act. Psychologists later theorized that Rowling's murderous impulses stemmed from a toxic mix of his abusive upbringing, sexual deviancy, and a craving for notoriety. In the Gainesville murders, Rowling seemed to act out a perverse fantasy of control and infamy. He chose young, vibrant college students as victims, perhaps projecting the power and normalcy he felt he lacked. He stalked them like prey, watching from the shadows and planning his attack. The terrifying saga of the Gainesville Ripper not only left an indelible mark on Florida, it seeped into American pop culture. In 1994, 4 years after the murder, an episode of ABC's news documentary series Turning Point profiled the case and its aftermath. That broadcast happened to catch the attention of a young screenwriter named Kevin Williamson, who was house-sitting alone one night and channel surfing. Williamson found himself engrossed and deeply unnerved by the Gainesville Ripper story. As the program ended, he noticed a window in the house was unexpectedly open, sending a jolt of fear through him. In a moment of real-life paranoia, he grabbed a kitchen knife and called a friend to calm his nerve, joking about horror movie and the thought that someone might be outside watching him. That sleepless night sparked an idea. What if a killer like Danny Rowling was stalking a small town, targeting teenagers? Williamson poured his inspiration into a screenplay originally titled Woodsboro Murder. It would eventually become the blockbuster 1996 film Scream, directed by Wes Craven. The movie's iconic mass killer, Ghostface, was directly inspired by Danny Rowling's reign of terror. The Gainesville case demonstrates how truth can be stranger and scarier than fiction. The horror genre frequently borrows from real events, but rarely had a crime spree so recent and raw been reimagined on screen. For Gainesville residents, the release of Scream was a mixed experience. Some were disturbed to see a tragedy loosely reflected in entertainment, while others took it as a sign that the story had a lasting cautionary lesson. In any case, Danny Rowling's dark legacy extended beyond the courtroom into the realm of pop culture, immortalizing the Gainesville Ripper in a way he likely craved, yet surely not in the way his victim's family would ever want. Despite the guilty plea, the case still proceeded to a sentencing phase. Because the state of Florida was seeking the death penalty, a jury had to hear evidence to decide Rowling's fate. Over several days, prosecutors laid out the horror of the murders once more in graphic detail. The defense, in turn, presented mitigating factors, chiefly Rowling's troubled upbringing and mental health. They brought in witnesses who described described how Danny's father abused him viciously, recounting incidents of young Danny being pinned to a wall and choked, or belittled and beaten down. Rowling's mother even testified, acknowledging that her husband's treatment of Danny was wrong, though she seemed in denial about the severity. In the end, the jury was unanimous. They recommended the death penalty for Danny Rowling on all 5 counts. The judge formally sentenced Rowling to death in April 1994, issuing 5 death sentences, 1 for each beautiful life he had taken. Danny Rowling was shipped off to Florida's death row at Florida State Prison in Stark. He would spend the next 12 years there, filing appeals that went nowhere. Ultimately, time ran out for the Gainesville Ripper. On October 25, 2006, at the age of 52, Danny Rowling was executed by lethal injection. In the execution chamber, Rowling made a final bizarre gesture. When asked for his last statement, he sang a hymn-like gospel song in a soft voice, ending with the words, "None greater than thee, O Lord," before falling silent. Only after his death did Rowling fully confess to the 3 murders in Shreveport. In a handwritten note passed to his spiritual advisor shortly before the execution, Rowling admitted to killing Julie Grissom, her father Tom, and her nephew Sean back in 1989. That brought his known victim count to 8. In the end, the tale of the Gainesville Ripper is more than a true crime story. It's a testament to a community's courage and the enduring power of remembrance. It's the reason those 5 names are still painted on that wall.